Top 10 Moments King's Guard, SCRAMS, at rude tourists. The streets around Buckingham Palace were buzzing with excitement. Tourists from all over the world crowded the area, their cameras swinging from their necks, their eyes wide with anticipation. Many had traveled for months, planned their days carefully, and now stood just a few meters away from one of the most famous symbols of Britain, the King's Guard. Their tall, red uniforms and shiny black hats had become iconic, appearing in postcards, movies, and countless social media posts. For many, seeing them in real life was almost like stepping into a storybook, where history seemed alive and majestic. The King's Guard stood perfectly still, their faces expressionless, as if they were statues carved out of stone. But unlike statues, these guards were very much alive. Trained soldiers, they had dedicated years of their lives to serving their country. They knew that standing in the cold wind for hours, under the gaze of thousands of tourists, required more than just physical strength. It required patience, discipline, and a deep understanding of tradition. Every movement they made, every turn of the head, was calculated and precise. It was a performance of duty, history, and pride, all at once. For the tourists, this was a chance to capture the perfect photograph. Families lined up, children climbed onto small steps to get a better view, and selfie sticks poked into the air as everyone tried to get closer. Many people whispered excitedly to one another, pointing at the guards and sharing fun facts they had read online. Some were fascinated by the uniforms, while others were curious about the seriousness of the guards' expressions. They didn't move, they didn't smile, and they didn't react to the endless clicks of cameras. To outsiders, it might have seemed almost magical. But while most visitors watched quietly and respectfully, there were always a few who tested the limits. Some tourists stepped too close, hoping to get a more dramatic shot. Others tried silly poses, making faces or waving at the guards, expecting a reaction. A few even tried to touch the guards, tall black hats, or leaned on their rifles. These small actions, though seemingly harmless, could break the tension and discipline that the guards worked so hard to maintain. The guards were trained to ignore such behavior, but humans have limits, and even the most disciplined soldiers could only remain statues for so long. The atmosphere was a mix of awe and tension. People whispered to one another, sharing stories they had heard about the guards screaming at rude tourists. Some laughed nervously, imagining what would happen if a guard suddenly shouted. Others, who had traveled far to see this moment, were careful not to cross any boundaries. They knew that these guards were not actors or performers. They were real soldiers upholding centuries of tradition. Every step they took, every movement they made, carried meaning. Despite the occasional rude tourist, the guards maintained their composure. Their eyes remained straight ahead, their hands firmly holding their rifles. Occasionally, a soldier would adjust his posture, shift his weight, or tap his boots lightly to stay balanced. To the untrained eye, it might have seemed like they were doing nothing, but in reality, every action was deliberate. Every second they stood still was a small victory of self-control and professionalism. The King's Guard was not just about protecting the palace. It was about representing the honor of their service and the dignity of a long-standing tradition. It wasn't just the tourists who were fascinated. Local Londoners often stopped by to watch the ceremonies, sometimes chuckling at the antics of visitors who didn't quite understand the rules. Street vendors sold souvenirs, and pigeons waddled across the plaza, adding a touch of everyday life to the otherwise formal setting. The guards remained a constant presence amid the chaos, a reminder of order in the middle of excitement. Their quiet strength contrasted sharply with the noise and energy around them, making them even more intriguing to watch. As the day went on, more tourists arrived, each hoping to witness something memorable. Some came in small groups, pointing out the guards to their friends. Others took guided tour, listening carefully to the history of the palace, the royal family, and the ceremonial duties of the guards. The guides spoke of how the soldiers trained for months, practicing their drills repeatedly to achieve perfection. They explained how each hat, each uniform detail, and even each step had a purpose, designed to reflect pride, respect, and centuries of royal tradition. The tourists listened in awe, imagining the years of preparation it took to stand there calmly, day after day, without showing emotion. Yet amid all this admiration, there was an underlying tension. The guards were human, after all. Their stoic expressions did not mean they were unaware of the mischief happening around them. They noticed every step, every flash of the camera, and every attempt to break their concentration. They were trained to remain calm, but in the back of their minds, they knew that even a small mistake could create a scene. Their patience was a quiet battle against the curiosity, excitement, and sometimes carelessness of the crowd. Some tourists didn't realize the effort it took to remain so disciplined. They thought the guards were simply following orders mechanically, like robots. But those who observed closely could see the subtle ways the soldiers managed their focus, breathing steadily, keeping their feet firmly planted, and holding their posture despite fatigue. It was an impressive display of human endurance, mental strength, and dedication. Each guard was a living testament to the idea that discipline could be both awe-inspiring and relatable. By midday, the crowd had grown even larger. Cameras clicked constantly, children laughed and pointed, and the occasional tourist tried a daring selfie. Some visitors whispered to each other about the stories they had read online, stories of guards finally losing it and shouting at disrespectful tourists. These moments were rare, but they were unforgettable. They reminded everyone that behind the perfectly polished uniforms and precise movements were real people, capable of feelings, reactions, and boundaries. The sun shifted in the sky, casting long shadows across the palace grounds. Tourists moved around, trying to get different angles for their photographs. Street performers entertained the crowds nearby, adding music and laughter to the scene. Yet, through all the noise and movement, the king's guard remained motionless. They were an anchor of calm, a symbol of patience in a world that often demanded instant reactions. Their silence spoke volumes, conveying authority, history, and the quiet strength of tradition. As the afternoon progressed, the crowd began to understand the delicate balance between respect and curiosity. Those who followed the rules, staying back, taking photos from a distance, and observing quietly, often found themselves rewarded with the best views and the most memorable moments. Those who pushed too far sometimes received a stern glare, a sudden movement, or in rare cases, a loud and surprising no from a guard. It was a reminder that rules were not just guidelines, they were part of a living tradition that demanded attention and respect. The king's guard, standing silently in their red uniforms, became more than just soldiers. They were teachers, reminding everyone of the importance of patience, respect, and history. Tourists left with more than photos. They left with stories, lessons, and a deeper appreciation for the discipline it took to uphold a centuries-old tradition. Even the smallest interactions, the briefest glances, and the quiet moments of observation became part of an unforgettable experience. An experience that blended admiration, awe, and sometimes a little fear of breaking the rules. By the end of the day, the area around Buckingham Palace slowly emptied. Tourists walked away, chatting excitedly about the guards, the palace, and the memorable moments they had witnessed. Some shared their videos online, adding to the growing collection of stories about the king's guard and their legendary patience. Yet even as the crowd disappeared, the guards remained, standing tall, silent, and disciplined, a living symbol of a tradition that continued to inspire and amaze the world. In those quiet moments, one could almost sense the weight of history in their stance. The red uniforms glowed in the fading sunlight, the black hats casting long shadows. Every detail mattered, the shine on the boots, the grip on the rifle, the careful posture. They were more than guards. They were a bridge between the past and the present, a reminder that respect, patience, and dedication were timeless values. Even for the most impatient tourist, even for the one who tried too hard to get a reaction, the lesson was clear. The King's Guard was not just a spectacle. They were a living testament to discipline, honor, and history. And as long as they stood there, unwavering and steadfast, they would continue to inspire awe, laughter, and the occasional startled scream from those who forgot the rules. As the day went on, the crowd around Buckingham Palace grew larger and livelier. Tourists were everywhere, cameras snapping, children running excitedly, and groups chatting animatedly about the royal family and the traditions of the King's Guard. Most people admired the soldiers quietly, careful not to disturb their strict routine. But it didn't take long for the first signs of tension to appear. Even the most disciplined guards were human, and some visitors, whether intentionally or unknowingly, tested the limits of their patience. It started with small things. A tourist leaning slightly too close to get a better photo. a group of friends whispering loudly and laughing right behind a guard, or a child stepping just a little too near the soldier's boots. On the surface, these were minor actions, nothing dangerous or threatening, but to the guards they were distractions. Their training required absolute focus. Every shift in their stance, every movement of their rifle was calculated. They had to maintain perfect posture for hours on end, and even the smallest disruption could make a long day feel twice as challenging. Some tourists didn't realize the effect of their actions. They saw the guards as part of a show, almost like actors in a play, rather than trained soldiers performing a centuries-old duty. A woman holding up her phone for a selfie in front of a guard might think it was harmless fun. A man trying to tap the top of a tall black hat for a photo might think it was just a joke. But the guards couldn't move, couldn't laugh, couldn't react in the way an ordinary person might. Their job demanded a strict combination of silence, discipline, and respect for history. The first cracks in their stoic exterior began to show, subtly at first. A guard would shift his weight from one leg to another, just enough to ease the strain on his muscles. His eyes, though still forward, might flick briefly to a tourist who was acting out of line. These small movements were almost invisible to the casual observer, but anyone paying attention could see the mental effort it took to remain perfectly still. In a way, it was a silent battle, one between centuries of discipline and the natural human response to irritation or fatigue. As the morning turned into afternoon, a few tourists became bolder. Some leaned over the barriers to get closer, their voices rising as they joked with friends. A child tried to wave directly at a guard, giggling at the soldier's serious face. A man held up his camera at an awkward angle, inches away from the guard's rifle, hoping to capture the perfect shot. Every small action demanded a careful, disciplined response from the guards, but the pressure began to mount. For a few moments, it almost seemed like the calm, controlled atmosphere was breaking. One notable moment occurred when a group of teenagers decided to perform a silly dance near one of the guards. They waved their arms, spun in circles, and laughed loudly, thinking it would be funny. The guard, standing perfectly straight, didn't move a muscle, but the sheer concentration required to ignore them was clear in the tension of his shoulders. His eyes remained forward, but behind that stoic exterior, he was fully aware of every motion and sound. To the tourists, it seemed like he was completely unbothered, but in reality, he was actively maintaining control, holding back a reaction that any ordinary person might find impossible. It wasn't just silly actions that tested the guards. Some tourists seemed genuinely unaware of the rules, moving too close, stepping over the barriers, or blocking the view of others. These actions weren't meant to be disrespectful, but they added to the growing tension. Guides and nearby visitors tried to warn them politely, reminding them to keep a safe distance, but not everyone listened. The guards remained calm, yet every step taken by the careless tourists required a renewed effort of focus and discipline. Their ability to stay composed in the face of distraction was impressive, a true demonstration of human endurance and professionalism. The King's Guard had faced these situations countless times, yet each day brought new challenges. They were trained to deal with crowds, cameras, and curiosity, but they also had limits. Their training involved not only physical preparation but mental conditioning. They practiced standing perfectly still, focusing their minds and controlling their emotions. These exercises were essential for moments like these, when the energy of the crowd could otherwise overwhelm their concentration. Even so, the more tourists ignored the rules, the more difficult it became to maintain that perfect balance. Some visitors did try to respect the rules, carefully observing from a distance, whispering to friends instead of shouting, and waiting patiently for the ceremonial movements. These tourists often noticed the subtle signs of strain in the guards, the tiny adjustments in posture, the blink of an eye that seemed just a bit slower, or the quiet sigh when a particularly bold tourist crossed a line. Observing these details added a new layer of appreciation. People began to understand that behind the rigid uniforms and serious faces were real people, fully aware of their surroundings, and managing a complex mix of duty, patience, and human emotion. Meanwhile, the palace grounds were full of life. Street vendors called out to potential customers, selling souvenirs and snacks. Children chased pigeons while parents tried to capture candid moments on camera. Tour guides provided historical context, explaining the origins of the King's Guard, the significance of the ceremonial uniforms, and the rules that tourists were expected to follow. The guides often pointed out the importance of discipline, noting that even small distractions could challenge the guards' ability to maintain composure. Tourists listened, fascinated by the balance between strict tradition and everyday reality. As the day progressed, the stories of the guards' patience began to spread. Some tourists shared their experiences online, posting videos of moments when the guards remained calm despite unusual or bold behavior. Others spoke of witnessing a rare instance of a guard reacting more directly, issuing a firm warning to a tourist who had stepped too close. These moments became talking points, creating a mixture of admiration and amusement. The idea that these disciplined soldiers could maintain such composure in the face of distraction made their dedication even more remarkable. It wasn't all about discipline and tension, though. There were moments of quiet humor and human connection. Occasionally, a guard would allow a small interaction, like a nod or a glance, with a respectful tourist. Children who waved politely often received a gentle acknowledgement. These tiny gestures were carefully measured, maintaining the formality of the tradition while allowing a glimpse of humanity behind the uniform. The balance was delicate, and it required constant awareness and control. By mid-afternoon, the crowd had settled into a rhythm. Tourists who had been too bold earlier had either been moved back by barriers or guided by staff to safer viewing areas. The guards continued to stand tall, their posture unwavering, but the effort required to maintain that calm was evident to anyone who looked closely. Every step, every movement, every breath was part of the intricate dance between patience and provocation, tradition and curiosity, history and modern-day tourism. Even when faced with distractions, the guards demonstrated a remarkable level of professionalism. They remained calm in the face of challenges, showing that discipline was not just about rules but about respect, for the tradition, for their role, and for the people around them. Visitors who observed this closely often left with a newfound admiration, realizing that what seemed like simple stoicism was actually a complex and demanding skill. The day wore on, and the sunlight began to shift, casting long shadows across the palace grounds. Tourists continued to wander, taking photos and exploring the area while the guards maintained their silent vigil. Occasionally, a bold tourist would attempt one last gesture to provoke a reaction, a step too close, a loud laugh, or a playful wave. But by now, most visitors had learned to respect the space and the rules. The guards' patience had subtly taught a lesson. Boundaries were important, and tradition deserved attention. Even as the crowd thinned, the stories of the day's incidents spread. People shared videos and photographs, capturing the moments when the guards' composure was tested. The rare glimpses of tension or subtle reaction became highlights, showing that even the most disciplined soldiers had limits, and that their dedication was both impressive and human. By the end of the afternoon, a sense of order had returned. The palace grounds, once chaotic with excited tourists and playful antics, now carried a quieter, more respectful atmosphere. The King's Guard remained at their posts, standing tall and proud, demonstrating the balance between strict tradition and human patience. Their quiet strength and unwavering dedication reminded everyone who watched that discipline was not only about rules, but also about character, endurance, and the subtle art of remaining calm in a world full of distractions. The first signs of frustration had passed, but the day had already shown a glimpse into the challenges of being a King's Guard. Tourists left with stories to tell, videos to share, and memories of witnessing discipline in action. And while the guards had not yet screamed or reacted loudly, the tension built in the afternoon hinted at the moments that were still to come. Moments that would test patience, capture attention, and create unforgettable experiences for everyone who visited the palace that day. By now, the day around Buckingham Palace had become a mix of calm admiration and subtle tension. Tourists were everywhere, some observing quietly, others testing the patience of the King's Guard. Up until this point, the guards had maintained their usual stoic composure. But as the crowds grew bolder and the distractions became more frequent, the soldiers' discipline was put to the test like never before. This was the moment when the human side of the guards began to show, though only subtly at first. It was clear that even the most well-trained soldier could feel irritation when provoked repeatedly. One of the first moments of noticeable reaction occurred when a group of teenagers began shouting playful jokes directly at a guard. They waved their arms, danced slightly, and tried to get a laugh from the soldier. At first, the guard did not move a muscle, keeping his eyes forward and posture perfect. But after several minutes of repeated attempts, a sudden, firm stop rang out. The voice was loud and commanding, surprising both the teenagers and the surrounding tourists. The effect was immediate. The group froze, staring at the guard in shock, realizing that their behavior had crossed an invisible line. This moment, while brief, revealed something important. The king's guard were trained to remain calm, but they were also human. Their job required immense self-control, but there were boundaries. When a tourist crossed those boundaries, the guard had every right to assert authority. The reaction was not anger in a personal sense. It was a demonstration of discipline and protection of the tradition they represented. The teenagers' jokes, harmless though they might have seemed, had disrupted the solemnity of centuries-old ceremonies, and the guard's voice reminded everyone that respect was required. Not all reactions involved loud commands. Some were subtler but equally effective. A guard might slowly step forward, shift his weight, or glare with a seriousness that immediately caused a tourist to retreat. These small, deliberate gestures conveyed authority without breaking the rules of decorum. For example, a tourist attempting to lean over the barrier for a better photo might suddenly notice the guard's intense stare. The effect was immediate, a combination of surprise and respect that restored order without the need for words. Such reactions were highly effective, demonstrating that even in silence, a guard's presence could command attention. One memorable instance involved a young child who wandered too close to a guard while holding a balloon. The guard, maintaining perfect posture, waited patiently for the parent to intervene. When no one moved quickly enough, he took a small step forward and gently, but firmly, signaled the parent to retrieve the child. No shouting was needed, yet the action captured the attention of everyone nearby. It was a reminder that the guards were not just standing statues. They were alert, responsible, and aware of their surroundings at all times. Even small disruptions were noticed and addressed appropriately. The crowd reacted in different ways to these moments. Some tourists laughed nervously, realizing the seriousness of the situation. Others whispered among themselves, sharing stories they had heard online about guards screaming at rude tourists. These viral stories added excitement and tension to the scene. People wanted to see how far the guards could remain calm, and they were fascinated when the soldiers finally responded. It created a delicate balance between entertainment and respect, a balance that the guards managed with remarkable skill. There were also moments of unexpected humor. A tourist, thinking he was being clever, tried to mimic the soldiers' movements while standing nearby. The guard, without breaking composure, raised his rifle slightly and shifted his stance, as if silently saying, "Pay attention and follow the rules." The tourist froze, realizing he had crossed an invisible line, and quickly stepped back. The small interaction drew smiles from other visitors, who appreciated both the discipline of the guard and the gentle lesson being taught. Even in these light-hearted moments, the underlying message was clear. Respect for tradition and authority was essential. The guards' reactions were not limited to tourists' physical movements. Loud noises, sudden shouts, and unexpected actions also demanded attention. One afternoon, a street performer's music echoed across the plaza, causing a group of tourists to become more energetic and boisterous. The guards responded by holding their posture even more firmly, their eyes forward, radiating calm authority. In some cases, they issued quiet but firm warnings, ensuring that the crowd understood that the ceremony required focus and restraint. It was fascinating to watch, like a careful dance between human behavior and disciplined response, where every action had a consequence and every reaction was measured. Social media had a big role in capturing these moments. Visitors often recorded the guards' reactions on their phones, sharing videos of subtle movements, sharp glances, and rare verbal commands. Each clip highlighted the human side of these iconic soldiers. People were fascinated not only by the guards' discipline, but also by the fact that even these professionals could be challenged. The videos often went viral, showing audiences worldwide the extraordinary patience, authority, and occasional humor of the King's Guard. Another moment of reaction occurred when a tourist attempted to climb over a barrier for a closer photo. The guard, noticing the action immediately, shouted a loud and clear "back." The voice carried across the square, drawing attention from other tourists and instantly restoring order. The visitor, startled, stepped back, realizing that the rules were strict and the guards were serious about maintaining them. The moment highlighted the balance the guards maintained: firm when necessary, calm and patient when possible, and always aware of their responsibility to both tradition and public safety. The guards' reactions were often subtle in daily observation but extremely precise. A shift in posture, a slight step forward, or a firm glance could communicate authority as effectively as words. This silent communication required immense concentration and awareness. Every tourist action, every noise, every movement had to be accounted for. The guards were constantly evaluating their environment, predicting possible disruptions, and preparing to respond appropriately. Their ability to manage these challenges while standing perfectly still for hours at a time was a remarkable demonstration of focus, endurance, and professionalism. The day continued with more challenges. Some tourists tried playful tricks, like waving or making faces to elicit a reaction. Others tested boundaries by leaning on barriers or stepping too close to the guards. Each situation was met with a response, sometimes subtle, sometimes firm, but always precise and appropriate. Visitors began to understand that the King's Guard were not just ceremonial figures. They were disciplined soldiers with a clear understanding of authority and respect. Their actions were a lesson in patience, human control, and the power of silent communication. Despite the occasional screaming moment, most interactions remained calm. The guards' training emphasized restraint and professionalism. Yet, when a situation required direct action, they were capable of responding in a way that restored order immediately. Tourists who witnessed these moments often left with a deeper respect for the guards, realizing that the iconic image of a soldier in a red uniform and black hat represented far more than tradition. It represented human discipline, focus, and the ability to maintain composure. Under pressure, as the afternoon drew to a close, the crowds thinned slightly, but the intensity of the interactions had left a lasting impression. The guards had successfully managed distractions, tested boundaries, and occasional disruptions with patience, authority, and even a touch of humor. The tourists, in turn, had learned lessons about respect, tradition, and the human side of these iconic soldiers. Even minor interactions, subtle reactions, and firm verbal commands contributed to a memorable experience for everyone present. The King's Guard had proven once again that discipline and patience were not just ideals. They were skills honed through rigorous training, real-world challenges, and centuries of tradition. Their ability to remain composed, to react only when necessary, and to maintain authority with both subtle gestures and clear commands highlighted the extraordinary dedication of these soldiers. It was not only a display of ceremonial duty, but also a fascinating lesson in human behavior, boundaries, and respect. By the end of the day, the stories of the guards' reactions were already spreading among the visitors. People shared tales of sudden verbal warnings, commanding stares, and perfectly timed gestures that restored order. The rare moments when a guard screamed at a tourist became memorable highlights, showing both the limits of human patience and the power of discipline. These stories added to the allure of Buckingham Palace and its famous guards, making it clear that each day brought new challenges, new lessons, and new experiences for anyone visiting this iconic place. The guards stood tall, calm, and composed as the sun began to lower in the sky. They had faced distractions, bold tourists, and unexpected situations, yet their performance remained impeccable. Each reaction, whether subtle or direct, reinforced their role as protectors of tradition, symbols of authority, and examples of human patience. Visitors left with cameras full of photos, stories to share, and a newfound understanding of the discipline behind those iconic red uniforms and tall black hats. In the end, the day at Buckingham Palace was not just about the tourists or the photographs. It was about witnessing the balance between human curiosity and professional discipline. The King's Guard had shown that even in the face of distraction and bold behavior, patience, respect, and precise action could maintain order. Their occasional verbal warnings, firm gestures, and subtle reactions were proof that even the most disciplined people are human. But that discipline, when combined with awareness and skill, could turn every challenge into a lesson and every distraction into an opportunity for respect. By late afternoon, the area around Buckingham Palace had taken on a unique energy. The tourists who had arrived early were now moving around more freely, some sitting on benches, others leaning against the railings, and a few wandering close to the guards despite the obvious warnings. Cameras clicked constantly, recording every detail, from the guards' perfect posture to the occasional subtle reaction that reminded everyone they were dealing with real people, not statues. What made the day truly remarkable, however, was the way these small moments began to spread far beyond the palace grounds. Social media played a huge role in turning ordinary interactions into viral sensations. Tourists, excited by the chance to capture something unusual, filmed every movement, every glare, every subtle shift of the guards. When one guard finally issued a firm warning to a group of playful teenagers, that moment was recorded from multiple angles. Within hours, the video was shared online, garnering thousands of views. People from all over the world watched the clip, laughing at the startled expressions of the tourists while also admiring the guards' unwavering composure. It was a perfect example of how discipline, patience, and a single moment of reaction could capture the public's imagination. One particularly memorable video involved a tourist attempting to climb over the barrier to get a closer look at a guard's uniform. The guard, standing tall and silent for hours, suddenly shouted a firm "back." The tourist froze in surprise, and the crowd nearby erupted in laughter. The moment was so perfectly timed that it seemed almost scripted. Within minutes, tourists who had witnessed the scene began recording and sharing it online. Comments poured in, praising the guard's patience and highlighting the humor of the situation. People admired the way a single, clear command could restore order and maintain tradition simultaneously. Other viral moments were subtler, but no less effective. A tourist who waved excessively or made loud noises near the guards often received nothing more than a piercing stare. These silent reactions were equally impactful. Videos of guards standing perfectly still, rifles at attention, while tourists fidgeted or froze in response, became popular online. People marveled at how a simple look could convey authority, control, and calmness all at once. Such moments reminded viewers that the King's Guard were not just ceremonial figures. They were highly trained soldiers capable of managing challenging situations with skill and poise. Tourists also began sharing stories about more unusual incidents. One video showed a small child approaching a guard with a balloon in hand. The guard, without breaking composure, gently signaled the parent to retrieve the child. The parent quickly complied, and the interaction ended quietly, but it was captured perfectly on video. Online viewers praised the guard's awareness and professionalism, noting the patience required to manage even minor disruptions without losing focus. These viral stories highlighted the human side of the guards, making them relatable while also reinforcing the importance of discipline. Public reactions to these viral moments varied. Many people found the clips amusing, laughing at the boldness or carelessness of some tourists. Others expressed admiration, commenting on the guards' remarkable ability to remain calm and professional under pressure. Schools, history enthusiasts, and fans of British culture often shared the videos as examples of tradition, discipline, and respect. In a way, these reactions helped educate people about the importance of etiquette and the dedication required to maintain centuries-old ceremonial practices. Every shared video or story served as a reminder that even small actions could have consequences when interacting with those who uphold tradition. The guards themselves rarely noticed how quickly these moments spread online. Their focus remained on the immediate environment, on the tourists in front of them, the movements of the crowd, and the rules they had to enforce. Yet the feedback from the public added a layer of significance to their actions. Each viral moment was a testament to their dedication, patience, and professionalism. For many, it reinforced the idea that the King's Guard were more than ceremonial figures. They were living symbols of discipline, training, and respect for history. Some viral moments also highlighted the lighter, more humorous side of the interactions. For example, a tourist once tried to imitate a guard's stance while standing nearby. The guard, noticing the attempt, adjusted his posture ever so slightly, as if silently correcting the imitation. The tourist froze, realizing the seriousness of the situation, and stepped back. Videos of such moments went viral not because of confrontation, but because they showcased the subtle balance between authority and humor. Audiences around the world appreciated how a disciplined response could be both strict and amusing. The popularity of these clips led to a surge of visitors hoping to witness a viral-worthy moment themselves. Tourists arrived with cameras at the ready, observing the guards carefully, waiting for something unexpected to happen. Some were careful, following all the rules and watching quietly, while others tested boundaries, hoping to provoke a reaction. Each day became a delicate mix of tradition, observation, and unpredictability. For those visiting Buckingham Palace, every interaction with the guards was potentially memorable, whether a small, subtle stare or a firm verbal command. Street vendors and guides noticed the change too. Vendors sold souvenirs themed around the famous, shouting guard moments, and tour guides shared stories of viral incidents with their groups, adding excitement to the tour. Parents cautioned their children, reminding them that the guards were real soldiers and that respect was required. Schools and educators even began using these stories as examples in lessons about history, discipline, and etiquette. The viral moments had transformed the guards' daily work into a worldwide phenomenon, combining humor, admiration, and education. One particular viral video featured a group of tourists taking selfies with exaggerated expressions. The guard, noticing the repeated distraction, stepped slightly forward and issued a loud, clear warning. The tourists froze, some laughing nervously, some embarrassed. Online viewers shared the clip widely, praising the guard's control while also finding humor in the tourists' surprised reactions. The incident demonstrated that while discipline was the priority, there was room for human expression and small moments of interaction, as long as boundaries were respected. Tourists also began sharing stories about moments when the guards responded without speaking. A simple glare, a slight shift in stance, or a careful adjustment of a rifle could communicate authority instantly. These silent interactions became particularly popular online, showing that discipline did not always require words. Observers were amazed by the effectiveness of subtle cues, understanding that the guards' training allowed them to maintain order without unnecessary confrontation. Each of these videos highlighted the precision, focus, and professionalism that were part of the guards' daily lives. The public reactions to viral moments went beyond amusement and admiration. People started discussing etiquette, respect, and the importance of preserving traditions. Social media posts often included reminders about the rules, encouraging future visitors to observe boundaries and appreciate the guards' dedication. The King's Guard, through their actions, both silent and verbal, became teachers in their own right, showing the world that discipline, patience, and respect could coexist with humor and humanity. Every viral clip added to the legend of Buckingham Palace and the guards who served there, blending history with modern storytelling. By early evening, the palace grounds were filled with visitors reflecting on their experiences. Some laughed as they recounted moments when guards had finally reacted. Others marveled at the subtle gestures that maintained order. Videos continued to circulate online, reaching audiences far beyond London. What had begun as ordinary daily duty had turned into a global phenomenon, a mixture of entertainment, education, and cultural admiration. The King's Guard had demonstrated that even in modern times, discipline, patience, and tradition could capture the imagination of people everywhere. Throughout all these moments, the guards remained focused on their primary duty, standing vigilant, protecting the palace, and upholding centuries of tradition. The viral videos, the stories, and the reactions were secondary, but they added an unexpected layer of meaning to the work. Tourists left with memories, photographs, and videos, while the guards continued their silent watch, embodying dedication, patience, and authority. The combination of viral fame and daily duty created a unique experience for everyone involved, blending humor, respect, and admiration in a way that few other professions could. Even as the sun began to set, casting golden light over the palace, the impact of the day's viral moments lingered. Tourists shared their favorite clips, discussed interactions with friends, and reflected on the guards' professionalism. Online, people continued to comment, laugh, and admire the soldiers' discipline. The viral stories had not only entertained, but also educated viewers about the balance of tradition and modern curiosity. Each moment, whether humorous or serious, became a part of the ongoing legend of the King's Guard. By the end of the day, it was clear that viral moments and public reactions had added a new dimension to the King's Guard. They were not only symbols of discipline and history, but also figures of fascination and entertainment in the digital age. Every subtle glare, every firm command, and every perfectly timed response had become part of a larger story, one that combined centuries of tradition with modern-day curiosity and social media culture. Tourists left Buckingham Palace with more than photos. They carried stories, lessons, and memories that would be shared around the world. The viral moments had reminded everyone that the King's Guard were human, disciplined, and alert. They could respond when necessary, teach lessons without words, and maintain order in ways that were both strict and entertaining. For anyone witnessing these interactions, the day had been unforgettable, a blend of humor, respect, and admiration that highlighted the extraordinary balance between tradition and human nature. As the day at Buckingham Palace came to a close, the excitement of the tourists slowly settled into quiet reflection. The bustling crowds that had filled the palace grounds during the day were thinning, leaving only a few lingering visitors who had stayed to watch the last moments of the guards. Watch. The sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow across the red uniforms and shiny black hats of the King's Guard. The scene, though quieter than earlier in the day, remained full of meaning. It was more than just a ceremony or a tourist attraction. It was a living lesson in discipline, respect, and history. Throughout the day, countless tourists had witnessed the remarkable balance the guards maintained between strict discipline and subtle human reactions. The viral moments, shared online and across social media, had shown the world that these soldiers were not merely statues standing still. They were alert, trained professionals capable of handling unexpected distractions with precision. Whether it was a loud shout, a playful gesture, or a small breach of etiquette, the guards' responses had been measured, deliberate, and effective. For visitors, these interactions became more than entertainment. They were lessons in behavior, patience, and respect. One of the most important lessons for the tourists was understanding boundaries. Many visitors had arrived with excitement and curiosity, sometimes forgetting that the guards' roles were serious and ceremonial. Watching a guard issue a firm command, step forward slightly, or use a sharp glare to redirect attention made it clear that rules existed for a reason. Boundaries were not just arbitrary. They ensured safety, order, and respect for a tradition that had endured for centuries. The guards' subtle and occasional verbal reactions reinforced the importance of observing these boundaries and respecting the professionalism of the soldiers. For families with children, the day had been particularly educational. Parents used the guards' behavior as examples of self-control, focus, and responsibility. Children who had witnessed a guard gently redirecting a parent to prevent a mishap learned that discipline could be kind and effective at the same time. The guards' actions demonstrated that authority did not have to be harsh or aggressive to be respected. Patience, awareness, and consistency were equally powerful tools. These lessons were often shared in homes, classrooms, and online, extending far beyond the palace grounds. The viral stories and shared videos had another effect. They encouraged tourists to be more mindful of their actions. Those who had arrived expecting purely entertainment often left with a sense of admiration and respect. Observing the guards, discipline, and occasional reactions highlighted the human effort behind what many assumed was a simple performance. Tourists realized that standing still for hours, maintaining perfect posture, and remaining alert in the face of constant distraction required extraordinary dedication and endurance. It was a reminder that even seemingly simple roles could demand immense skill and patience. For history enthusiasts, the day provided a deeper connection to Britain's traditions. Each command, gesture, and posture of the guards carried historical significance. The uniforms, rifles, and ceremonial drills were not only visually impressive, they represented centuries of military practice and royal protocol. Witnessing the guards' reactions firsthand gave tourists insight into the challenges of upholding these traditions in a modern, bustling environment. The day's experiences highlighted that history was not only about books or museums. It was alive, dynamic, and often tested by human behavior in real time. The guards themselves remained largely unaware of how their actions had captivated the world online. Their focus never wavered from their duties. Every stance, every shift of weight, and every reaction was part of their responsibility to maintain order and protect the palace. Yet for those observing, it became clear that the guards were also teaching lessons. Lessons in respect, discipline, and patience, without ever intending to do so. Each verbal warning, subtle gesture, or calm stare was a reminder of the effort required to maintain professionalism in a world filled with distractions. The day also demonstrated the power of human patience. Tourists who had been loud, playful, or careless were met not with anger but with firm, measured responses. The guards' ability to maintain composure despite repeated provocations emphasized that patience was a skill cultivated through training, awareness, and mental strength. Visitors learned that discipline was not about suppressing emotion entirely. It was about controlling it, choosing the right moment to respond, and ensuring that actions served a purpose. Watching this in real time was both inspiring and instructive. As the sun continued to set, reflections on the day extended beyond the palace grounds. Tourists shared their experiences with friends, family, and followers online, emphasizing the guards, patience, professionalism, and occasional humorous reactions. Stories circulated about the viral videos, the firm commands, and the subtle gestures that restored order. These narratives reinforced the idea that respect for tradition and authority was not optional. It was essential for a positive and memorable experience. The guards had managed to turn ordinary interactions into educational and entertaining lessons for millions of people worldwide. Many visitors also reflected on the contrast between modern technology and centuries-old tradition. Cameras, smartphones, and social media had made it possible to capture every movement, yet the guards' discipline ensured that their focus never wavered. They stood as a symbol of consistency in a rapidly changing world, showing that dedication, patience, and respect could endure even amidst constant distractions. For tourists, it was a powerful reminder that some lessons about respect, professionalism, and human behavior remain timeless. By early evening, the palace grounds were quieting, but the impact of the day's events lingered. The tourists who remained observed the guards with a sense of admiration and reverence. They had witnessed moments of subtle humor, firm discipline, and human patience that few outside of London could truly experience. These moments, captured on video and remembered in stories, would continue to inspire, entertain, and educate people far beyond the palace. It was a reminder that even in a role defined by tradition, human effort and professionalism could create moments that were unforgettable. Reflecting on the day, it was clear that the King's Guard had succeeded in multiple ways. They had maintained order, upheld centuries of tradition, and even provided moments of entertainment and humor. They had demonstrated that discipline was not rigid or unfeeling, but a careful balance of patience, awareness, and precision. Tourists had learned lessons about boundaries, respect, and the effort behind ceremonial roles. The viral moments shared online had amplified these lessons, reaching audiences worldwide and highlighting the importance of human behavior in upholding tradition. Parents, teachers, and guides often pointed out the broader significance of these experiences. The guards' patience and professionalism served as models for children and adults alike. They illustrated that discipline and respect could coexist with human emotion and occasional humor. Even when visitors tested boundaries or acted impulsively, the guards' responses were measured, appropriate, and instructive. These interactions became lasting examples of how to manage challenges calmly and respectfully in everyday life. As the last tourists left, the guards continued their duties, standing silently, alert, and composed. Their day had been long, filled with distractions and small tests of patience, yet they had maintained the highest level of professionalism. Every action they took, whether subtle or direct, was part of a larger story. A story of dedication, human endurance, and the importance of tradition in a modern world. Their presence served as a reminder that discipline was not only about rules, but also about character, respect, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. Even in moments of fatigue, the guards remained aware and vigilant. They understood that each tourist interaction, no matter how small, could be a teaching moment. A firm command, a subtle gesture, or a careful stare could educate visitors about respect and boundaries. The guards' ability to turn everyday distractions into lessons demonstrated not only their training, but also their insight and intelligence. They were living examples of how professionalism and human awareness could coexist, creating meaningful experiences for those who observed them. By the end of the day, the story of Buckingham Palace and the King's Guard had become a blend of tradition, human behavior, and modern storytelling. Tourists left with memories, videos, and stories to share. Online audiences engaged with viral clips, reflecting on moments of discipline, humor, and patience. Families, educators, and history enthusiasts all found lessons in the Guard's actions. The events of the day had reinforced the timeless values of respect, patience, and professionalism, showing that even in a world full of distractions, these qualities remained essential and inspiring. In conclusion, the King's Guard had once again proven that their role was far more than ceremonial. They were symbols of discipline, tradition, and human endurance. Their measured responses, whether verbal, physical, or subtle, taught lessons in patience, respect, and professionalism. Tourists had learned that boundaries mattered, that discipline required effort, and that human behavior could influence even the most well-trained soldiers. The viral moments, shared across the world, ensured that these lessons reached far beyond the palace gates. As night fell and the palace grounds grew quiet, the guards continued their silent vigil. Their day had been long, their patience tested, and their professionalism displayed for thousands to witness. Yet they remained calm, composed, and dignified. For those who had observed them, the experience was unforgettable, a combination of history, human skill, and lessons that would linger long after the crowds had gone. Buckingham Palace was not just a building, and the King's Guard was not just a ceremony. They were a living reminder of the power of discipline, respect, and human dedication.